I'm a PhD candidate and I am an adjunct lecturer within the University of Hawaii system. I'm a part of the Hawaii Scholars for Education and Social Justice along here with my colleagues. We are a volunteer independent group of scholars and researchers who come together to synthesize research on education and provide information to the public about social justice issues, particularly within education. One of the things that we've done collectively in our first endeavor is to try to dispel some myths and misconceptions about the constitutional amendment that has been proposed, that will be on the ballot for supplemental funding for funding for public schools. There's four major misconceptions that we would like to review and go over, and what we've done is kind of culled through research and tried to find the pieces that we know exist and that actually speak back against a lot of the misconceptions that are being promoted about the constitutional amendment. So one of the misconceptions is that the Hawaii State Department of Education is adequately funded. But we definitely know this not to be true. Hawaii ranks among the states lowest in the percentage of state and local expenditures for K-12 funding. When adjusted for cost of living, Hawaii teachers are the lowest paid in the nation. We have a lot of emergency hires that happen because of this. Undertrained substitutes who are going into public schools for emergency hires because our working conditions for teachers are so poor that we have to hire emergency hires. Misconception 2, that more funding will not lead to improved education. But what we know is that funding matters in education and that there's clear evidence that quality education is expensive and there's few low-cost alternatives to well-funded schools. In studies across the U.S., we know that increased funding actually increases student achievement and performance, increases high school graduation rates, leads to higher adult incomes. Misconception 3. That Hawaii property taxes will adversely affect Hawaii's economy and local people's lifestyles. There's other people who can hear, particularly Lawrence Boyd, who will talk more specifically about this. But what we know is that Hawaii has a very high percentage of out-of-state property owners who leave their places vacant for most of the year. And so working to increase the investment property taxes also actually helps to lower home prices and rents for local families. Misconception 4 is that public school funding only affects parents with children in public schools. But we know that Hawaii's employers and consumers actually rely upon an educated workforce, and that better funded public education is related to lower levels of poverty, and public schools where students from diverse cultural backgrounds can interact and learn from one another actually improves all of our lives. So I'm going to pass it over, but that's just kind of an outline of the misconceptions and where our research comes into play.
And you have to do something that stops home prices from rising. And the easiest way of doing that is to begin cutting off this out-of-state demand. Okay, and so basically what happens, the way the market works is, okay, out-of-state demand comes in, prices out local residents who then have to rent, oftentimes from the people that have bought the property in the first place, and demand for rentals increases as a result of that. So rents and home prices rise at the same rate. That's the central cause of rising rents and home prices. This was actually done in Vancouver, which actually has single-family home prices identical to Hawaii. They recognized the problem was out of Vancouver demand. They instituted a program where that demand was taxed at a higher rate, incidentally, in order to improve education. and it dampened the rise in home prices. Same thing could happen here. That if you want to do something about poverty, about rising home prices, you have to tax the demand that's causing the rise. It's sort of like the way if you wanted to stop smoking by minors, you raise the tax on cigarettes.
Hi, I'm Claudia Zorek, and I'm one of the researchers who collaborated in preparing this brief. And we would like to highlight again that funding matters in education. Several studies showed, findings of the studies showed that increased funding led to positive student outcomes, especially increases in applying for college degrees, as well as increases in incomes of these individuals once they became adults. And increased funding in education has the greatest positive influence on student outcomes when it's used for teacher salaries and also for smaller class sizes, as well as lengthening the school year. And what does that mean for the education in Hawaii is that increased funding in Hawaii could allow the DOE to expand promising practices. We call those practices bright spots in education, such as early college, where students could take college level courses earlier in high school campuses, which would increase access to pre-K programs in public schools.
Some of the opposition to the Conam amendment states that it will increase the cost of living in Hawaii. That's inevitable. There's no way that's not going to happen. It will take another recession for the cost of living to decline. So, if people of Hawaii support equal educational opportunity, they should vote yes on this constitutional amendment. If they're opposed to increasing ethnic inequality, then they should also support this constitutional amendment.
For primary homes, because the amendment doesn't actually specify as far as, what an investment property is.
Okay, an investment property is a property that's bought either to be sold at a higher price later or rented out. We have an actual category called a homeowner's exemption, that if people are living in that they're exempted. That would follow through. It's not an investment property defined by the fact that you're living there. And because legally, that's the definition a court would look at. The constitutional amendment actually ensures that resident homeowners will not be taxed.
I think I'm hearing the big media campaign against this amendment, say we support education, just not this way, right?
They've been saying that for 30 years. When are they going to come up with some kind of solution to that issue?
This constitutional amendment came through the state legislature at the same time that teachers in Oklahoma, Arizona, Colorado were on strike. And rather than striking, teachers here came up with an alternative solution to be able to both increase salaries but also improve resources for education for children. As John mentioned, public education has been trying to get increased funding for 30 years, but that hasn't happened. And so as a way to try to create an alternative funding mechanism, that is part of it. But I think we also have to look at, as Dr. Boyd mentioned, that these issues are connected with high cost of living in Hawaii, with affordable housing in Hawaii. And so what I think that the amendment does is actually links to really important issues within the state of Hawaii. The underfunding of public schools, with also we have really high home prices, and so how do we actually target the large home prices by going after higher tax rates on investment properties? That will, economists agree that that should lower the cost of home prices, but then we also have this win-win for public education. And so the idea is that hopefully we're actually getting at these interconnected issues within the state.